The evening sky over New Terra glowed with shades of purple and orange as the sun dipped below the distant mountains. Jake Morrison wiped the grease from his hands and looked at the hover truck he had just finished repairing. It was old and battered, but it would run for another few years now. The owner would be happy. Jake ran a small repair shop at the edge of the colony, fixing anything people brought him. Hover vehicles, farming equipment, water purifiers, communication devices. If it was broken, Jake could usually figure out how to fix it. He was 24 years old, tall and lean with dark hair that always seemed to need cutting. His clothes were permanently stained with oil and dirt. Jake had learned everything he knew by himself. There were no fancy schools on New Terra, no certified training programs. Just broken things and the need to make them work again. His father, Daniel Morrison, worked as the head gardener at Governor Palmer's estate. It was honest work, but it paid very little. They lived in a small house near the workshop. It was enough. Jake was about to close up for the night when he heard a sound like thunder rolling across the sky. He looked up and saw something streaking through the atmosphere. It was glowing bright red from the heat of re-entry. A ship, but it was moving wrong. Tumbling. Falling. Jake watched as it disappeared beyond the tree line about 2 miles from the colony. A few seconds later, he felt the ground shake. The crash sent up a column of smoke that rose into the darkening sky. Within minutes, sirens were wailing throughout the colony. Emergency vehicles raced toward the crash site. Jake grabbed his jacket and toolkit and jumped into his own battered hover bike. He followed the emergency vehicles along the rough road that led into the forest. His curiosity was stronger than his common sense. He had never seen a ship crash before. New Terra was a quiet place. Most days, nothing interesting happened at all. When Jake arrived at the crash site, he found colony security already setting up a perimeter. The ship had plowed a long furrow through the trees before coming to rest in a clearing. It was not like any vessel Jake had seen before. Most ships that visited New Terra were cargo haulers or passenger transports, blocky and functional. This ship was different. It was sleek and smooth with curves that seemed almost artistic. The hull was made of something that shimmered even in the dim light. Silver and blue colors flowed across the surface like oil on water. The security chief, a woman named Helen Brooks, was talking into her radio. She saw Jake and waved him back. "Stay behind the line," she told him. "We do not know if it is dangerous." Jake nodded, but he kept watching. Emergency crews were approaching the ship carefully. They were scanning it with handheld devices. After a few minutes, one of them called out that there were no radiation leaks and no chemical hazards. The ship appeared to be safe. A hatch on the side of the vessel suddenly hissed and opened. Everyone stepped back and raised their weapons. A figure appeared in the opening. A woman. She was wearing a flight suit that looked as advanced as the ship itself. The material seemed to shift colors as she moved. She climbed down from the hatch slowly, clearly shaken but not injured. She raised her hands to show she was unarmed. Helen approached her cautiously. The woman began speaking, but her words were strange. Not another language exactly, but an accent so thick it was hard to understand. She seemed to realize this and touched something on her wrist. A small holographic display appeared. She spoke into it and her words came out again, this time clear and understandable.
"I am Lisa Grant," she said.
"I mean no harm. My ship malfunctioned during the jump. I need help." Helen asked her where she was from. Lisa looked tired. "Earth's inner systems," she replied. "Capital Prime Sector. I was traveling to the capital world when my quantum drive failed. I barely managed to bring the ship down without destroying it completely." Helen frowned. The inner systems were the wealthy core worlds of human space, the places where all the money and power were concentrated. Frontier colonies like New Terra rarely saw anyone from that far in. "What brings you out here?" Helen asked. Lisa hesitated. "Family business," she said finally. "Urgent family business. I need to reach Capital Prime within 3 days or I will lose everything. But my ship is damaged. The quantum drive is offline. I tried to repair it myself, but the damage is beyond what I can fix with the onboard systems." Helen looked back at the ship. "That is far beyond anything we have here," she said. "We have mechanics who can fix hover vehicles and basic machinery, but nothing like this. Your best option is to send a message and wait for a rescue ship from the inner systems." Lisa shook her head. "There is no time," she said. "A rescue ship would take at least a week to arrive. I need to leave tomorrow at the latest. Is there no one here who can even look at it?" Helen thought for a moment. "There is one person," she said slowly. "Jake Morrison. He runs a repair shop in town. He has a gift for fixing things. But I do not know if even he could handle something like this. Lisa turned and her eyes scanned the crowd of onlookers. Which one is Jake Morrison? She asked. Helen pointed to where Jake stood behind the security line. That young man there. The one with the toolkit. Lisa looked at Jake for a long moment. Then she walked toward him. The security personnel moved aside to let her through. She stopped in front of Jake and studied his face. You are Jake Morrison, she asked. Jake nodded. I am. Can you fix advanced spacecraft? Lisa asked. Jake glanced past her at the ship. I have never worked on anything like that before, he admitted. I fix hover trucks and farming equipment mostly. Lisa looked disappointed. But Jake continued, I can look at it. I cannot promise anything, but I can try. Lisa seemed to consider this. How much would you charge just to examine it? She asked. Jake shrugged. Nothing, he said. If I cannot fix it, then I have not earned anything. Lisa smiled for the first time. A real smile that reached her eyes. You are different from what I expected, she said. Most mechanics I know would charge just for showing up. Jake did not know what to say to that, so he just waited. All right, Lisa said. Look at it tonight. If you think you can fix it, we will talk about payment in the morning. She turned back to Helen. Is there somewhere I can stay tonight? Helen nodded and led her toward one of the emergency vehicles. Jake walked toward the ship. His heart was beating fast. The other emergency workers had backed away to give him space. They all knew Jake. They knew he was good at what he did. But this was different. This was technology from the inner systems. This was far beyond anything on New Terra. Jake approached the vessel slowly and placed his hand on the hull. It felt warm and alive somehow, like the ship was breathing. He walked around it studying the damage. The landing had crumpled some of the lower plating. Scorch marks ran along one side, but the real damage was inside. He could sense it. Jake climbed through the open hatch and entered the ship. The interior was like something from a dream. Smooth surfaces that glowed with soft light. Controls that appeared as holographic displays floating in the air. Everything was clean and precise. Nothing like the cluttered workshops and patched-together equipment he was used to. He made his way through the narrow corridor to what he assumed was the engine room. When he opened the door, he stopped and stared. The quantum drive was unlike anything he had ever imagined. A sphere of crystalline material suspended in a framework of impossibly thin metal. Energy conduits ran from it in all directions. Even powered down, it seemed to pulse with potential. Jake spent the next 3 hours examining the drive system. He did not understand half of what he was looking at. The technology was centuries ahead of anything on the frontier. But as he studied it, patterns began to emerge. Connections that made sense. He could see how energy flowed through the system. He could see where the flow had been interrupted. It was like reading a language he did not know but somehow understanding the meaning anyway. By the time he climbed out of the ship, his mind was racing. This was impossible. This was beyond him. But maybe, just maybe, there was a way. Jake did not sleep much that night. He lay in his small bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about the crystalline sphere he had seen inside Lisa Grant's ship. The quantum drive. Even the name sounded impossible. Quantum. The word meant dealing with the smallest particles of matter and energy. Things that behaved in ways that defied normal understanding. Jake knew the basics from old educational files he had studied. But knowing about something and actually working with it were completely different things. He got up before dawn and made himself coffee. His father was already awake, tending to the small garden behind their house. Daniel Morrison was 58 years old but looked older. Years of hard physical labor had worn him down. His hands were rough and scarred. His back was bent, but his eyes were still sharp and kind. He saw Jake standing at the window with his coffee and came inside. You look like you have been wrestling with a problem all night, Daniel said. Jake nodded and told his father about the crashed ship and Lisa Grant's request. Daniel listened quietly. When Jake finished, the older man poured himself coffee and sat at the small kitchen table. That is quite an opportunity, he said, or quite a disaster waiting to happen. Jake smiled despite his worry. You always know how to see both sides, he said. Daniel shrugged. I have lived long enough to know that most opportunities carry risks. The question is whether the risk is worth taking. What does your gut tell you? Jake thought about it. My gut tells me I should be terrified, he said. This is technology I have never touched before. If I make a mistake, I could destroy the ship completely. or worse, but something else tells me that maybe I can do this. When I was looking at that drive last night, it started to make sense. Not all of it, not even most of it, but enough that I could see the problem. Daniel nodded slowly. Then you already know what you are going to do, he said. You are going to try, because that is who you are. You have never walked away from a broken thing in your life. Jake went to his workshop at sunrise. He gathered tools and diagnostic equipment. Most of it was primitive compared to what the ship probably had built in, but Jake had learned that sometimes simple tools worked better than complicated ones. Sometimes you needed to feel the problem with your hands rather than read it on a screen. He loaded everything into his hoverbike and headed back toward the crash site. Security was still there, but they waved him through. Everyone in the colony knew by now that Jake was going to attempt the repair. Some people thought he was brave. Others thought he was foolish. Jake tried not to think about either opinion. Lisa Grant was already at the ship when Jake arrived. She looked like she had not slept either. Her flight suit was rumpled and her hair was tied back in a messy ponytail. She was drinking something from a metallic cup. When she saw Jake, she straightened up and tried to look more composed. "Good morning," she said. "Did you reach any conclusions?" Jake set down his toolkit. "I think I can see what is wrong," he said carefully. "But I cannot promise I can fix it. The technology is far beyond anything I have worked with before." Lisa nodded. "I understand," she said. "But you are willing to try." Jake met her eyes. "I am willing to try," he confirmed. "But I need to be honest with you. If I make this worse, if I damage the drive beyond repair, you will be stranded here for much longer." Lisa smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "If you do nothing, I am already stranded," she said. "At least this way there is a chance." She paused and seemed to be deciding something. Then she spoke again. "I want to make you an offer. If you can repair my ship and get me to Capital Prime within the deadline, I will pay you 10 million credits." Jake stared at her. For a moment he was sure he had misheard. 10 million credits was more money than most frontier colonists saw in their entire lives. It was generational wealth, life-changing wealth. "You cannot be serious," he said. Lisa's expression was completely serious. "I am," she said. "My family controls Grant Industrial Combine. We manufacture ship components and power systems for most of the inner systems. 10 million credits is significant money even for us, but it is nothing compared to what I stand to lose if I do not reach Capital Prime in time." "What do you stand to lose?" Jake asked. Lisa looked away toward the horizon. "My father is dying," she said quietly. "He built the company from nothing and now he is letting go. His will states that all his children must be present for the reading or they forfeit their inheritance. My brother has been working behind the scenes to delay my return. He wants everything for himself. If I miss the deadline, I lose not just money but control of the company my father spent his life building. I lose his legacy." Jake understood family. He understood legacy. He looked at Lisa and saw the desperation in her eyes. "But 10 million credits," he said. "That is too much." Lisa shook her head. "Not for what I am asking you to risk," she said. "You said yourself that you could make things worse. You could destroy my only way home. You are risking your reputation and potentially facing legal consequences if something goes wrong. That risk deserves compensation." She paused again. "And there is more. If you succeed, I will also pay your father 10 million credits." Jake felt like the ground had shifted under his feet. "My father," he said. "Why?" Lisa had clearly thought this through. "Because I researched you last night," she said. "I used my ship's communication system to access colony records. I learned that you are the son of a gardener, that you taught yourself everything you know, that you work long hours for little pay to help support your father, that your father has health problems he cannot afford to treat properly. 10 million credits would change his life. He could retire, get proper medical care, live comfortably for the rest of his years." Jake felt something tighten in his chest. His father had never complained, not once. Daniel Morrison worked in the heat and the cold, tending plants and maintaining landscapes for wealthy people who barely noticed him. His back hurt constantly. His hands were stiff with arthritis, but he never said anything. He just kept working because that was what needed to be done. The idea that Jake could change that, could give his father comfort and rest and care was overwhelming. "I need time to think," Jake said. Lisa nodded. "I understand," she said, "but I need an answer soon. I have already lost one day. If we are going to do this, we need to start immediately. Jake walked away from the ship and found a quiet spot under a tree. He sat down and tried to clear his mind. 20 million credits total, 10 for him and 10 for his father. It was absurd. It was impossible. It was everything he had never dared to dream about. But the real question was not about the money. The real question was whether he could actually do the repair. Jake closed his eyes and thought back to the previous night. He remembered standing in front of that crystalline sphere. He remembered how it had seemed incomprehensible at first, just a jumble of advanced technology beyond his understanding. But then he had started to see patterns. The way the energy conduits connected, the way the crystalline matrix was structured, the way information flowed through the system. It was not so different from other things he had repaired. More complex, yes. More delicate. More dangerous. But the fundamental principles were the same. Everything was just energy and information. Everything was just problems waiting for solutions. Jake opened his eyes and stood up. He walked back to where Lisa waited by the ship. "All right," he said. "I will do it. But I have conditions." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead." "First," Jake said, "you do not pay me anything unless I succeed completely. If the ship flies and gets you to Capital Prime on time, then we talk about payment. If I fail, you owe me nothing. Second, you let me work without interference. I need to focus, and I cannot have people looking over my shoulder questioning every decision. Third, if at any point I determine that I'm making things worse, I stop immediately and we find another solution. Do you agree?" Lisa considered his terms. Then she held out her hand. "I agree," she said. Jake shook her hand. Her grip was firm and strong. "You should know something else," Lisa said. "If you succeed, you will not just be helping me. The ship you are about to repair is a prototype. It is a new design that combines military and civilian technology. My company has been developing it for 3 years. If you can fix it, you will be proving that the design is viable. That has implications beyond just my personal situation." Jake felt the weight of that information settle on him. He had not realized he was working on something experimental, something important, but it did not change his decision. He had already committed. "Are you trying to make me more nervous?" he asked. Lisa smiled. "No," she said. "I am trying to make sure you understand what you are attempting. This is not just about money or family. This is about advancing human technology. If a frontier mechanic with no formal training can repair a prototype quantum drive using basic tools and intuition, that says something important about how we design our systems. It says we have been overcomplicating things." Jake picked up his toolkit. "Then I guess we should get started," he said. Lisa nodded and followed him to the ship. As they walked, Jake noticed that a crowd had begun to gather. Word had spread through the colony that the repair attempt was beginning. People wanted to watch. Jake tried to ignore them. He climbed into the ship with Lisa right behind him. She showed him to the engine room and then stepped back. Jake spent the first hour just observing. He did not touch anything. He did not connect any equipment. He just looked. The crystalline sphere hung suspended in its framework, motionless and dark. Without power flowing through it, the quantum drive looked almost dead. But Jake could see the potential energy locked inside. The crystal was not just one solid piece. It was made up of millions of smaller crystalline structures all aligned in a specific pattern. That pattern was what allowed the drive to bend space and time. That pattern was what had been disrupted. Nova continued to provide information as Jake studied the problem. The AI explained how the quantum drive worked in terms that were technically accurate, but almost impossible to understand. Jake let the words wash over him without trying to grasp every detail. He had learned long ago that sometimes understanding came not from knowing everything, but from seeing the essential truth hidden beneath complexity. The essential truth here was simple. The crystals were out of alignment. They needed to be brought back into harmony. But how do you align something at the microscopic level? Jake did not have precision equipment designed for quantum engineering. He had wrenches and calibrators and diagnostic tools meant for machinery 1,000 times less delicate. It would be like trying to perform surgery with a hammer. He sat back and rubbed his eyes. This was impossible. Everyone had been right to doubt him. He was a fool for thinking he could do this. Then he remembered something his father had once told him. Daniel Morrison had been teaching Jake how to graft plants. It was delicate work. You had to cut both plants at precise angles and bind them together so they would grow as one. Jake had been frustrated because his cuts were never perfect. His father had watched him struggle and then said something Jake never forgot. Perfection is not always necessary. Sometimes what matters is understanding what the plant wants to do. Plants want to grow. Plants want to heal. If you give them a chance, they will do the work themselves. Your job is not to force them. Your job is to create the conditions for healing. Jake opened his eyes and looked at the quantum drive with new perspective. What did it want to do? It wanted to function. It wanted to align. The crystalline matrix had formed naturally during manufacturing. The alignment was its natural state. The crash had forced it out of alignment, so maybe Jake did not need to manually realign every microscopic crystal. Maybe he just needed to create the conditions that would allow the system to realign itself. He called up to Nova. "Can the drive be powered on in its current state?" he asked. Nova responded immediately. Negative. Attempting to power the drive while the matrix is misaligned would cause catastrophic failure. The energy feedback would shatter the crystal completely. Jake nodded. What if we apply very low power? Not enough to activate the quantum field, but enough to energize the crystal structure. Would that be safe? Nova was silent for several seconds. That approach is not in my operational protocols, the AI said finally. However, analysis suggests it would not cause immediate failure. The risk is that without proper alignment, even low power could create microfractures that would prevent future operation. So it was a gamble. Apply gentle power and hope the crystal began to self-align, or do nothing and admit defeat. Jake pulled out his toolkit and selected a modified power regulator he had built years ago. It was designed to provide extremely precise low-voltage outputs. He had used it to repair sensitive electronics. He studied the quantum drive's power coupling points. They were not compatible with his equipment. Of course they were not. Nothing was going to be easy about this. Jake spent the next 2 hours fabricating adapters. He used spare parts from his toolkit and materials he found in the ship's storage compartments. Lisa checked on him once. She stood in the doorway of the engine room and watched him work. "You have been in here for 3 hours and I have not seen you touch the drive yet," she said. Jake did not look up from his work. "Preparation is the most important part," he said. "If I rush this, I will break something." Lisa seemed satisfied with that answer and left him alone. By midday, Jake had completed his adapters. He carefully connected his power regulator to the quantum drive's energy input nodes. His hands were steady despite his nervousness. One wrong connection and he could fry the entire system. He checked each connection 3 times before he was satisfied. Then he called to Nova. "I am ready to apply power," he said. "Start at 0.001% of normal operating power." Nova acknowledged the instruction. A moment later, the faintest glow appeared within the crystalline sphere. It was barely visible. Just a hint of blue light deep inside the crystal. Jake watched intently. Nothing happened for several minutes. The glow remained steady, but there was no change. He was about to increase the power when Nova spoke. "I am detecting movement in the crystalline matrix," the AI said. "Individual crystal structures are shifting position. The rate is extremely slow but measurable." Jake felt his heart beat faster. It was working. The crystals were responding to the energy and beginning to move back toward their natural alignment. "How long will the realignment take at this rate?" Jake asked. Nova calculated. "Approximately 47 hours. Jake felt disappointment crash over him. 47 hours. They did not have that much time. Lisa needed to leave tomorrow at the latest. He was about to shut down the power when an idea occurred to him. What if they could speed up the process? Not by increasing power, which would be dangerous, but by helping the crystals find their proper positions. He studied the holographic display that Nova was projecting. The crystals were moving, but they were moving randomly, each one searching for alignment independently. There was no coordination, no pattern to guide them. Jake thought about magnetic fields. Crystals could be influenced by magnetic fields. If he could generate a very specific field pattern, he might be able to guide the crystals instead of just waiting for them to find alignment on their own. But creating such a field would require equipment he did not have. He sat back and thought hard. Everything he needed had to be available either in his toolkit or somewhere on the ship. He could not call for special equipment because there was no time for it to arrive. Then he remembered the ship's navigation system. Starships use sophisticated magnetic field generators for various purposes. Navigation, artificial gravity, particle deflection. Those generators could be reprogrammed. Jake climbed out of the engine room and made his way to the cockpit. Lisa was there reviewing data on a holographic display. She looked up when Jake entered. "Something wrong?" she asked. "No," Jake said. "But I need access to your navigation controls. Specifically, the magnetic field generators." Lisa looked confused. "The quantum drive is in the engine room," she said. "Why do you need the navigation systems?" Jake explained his idea quickly. The crystals needed guidance. The magnetic field generators could provide that guidance. But he would need to create a very specific field pattern, one that corresponded to the proper alignment of the crystalline matrix. Lisa listened and then nodded slowly. "That is clever," she said. "But do you know how to program magnetic field generators?" Jake smiled. "No," he admitted. "But I am hoping Nova can help with that part." The AI spoke up. "I can generate the required field pattern based on the proper crystal alignment data in my memory," Nova said. "However, I must warn you that using the navigation systems while the ship is grounded could cause interference with colony communications equipment." Jake thought about that. "How much interference?" he asked. Nova calculated. "Minimal," the AI said. "Some static on radio frequencies, possibly some disruption to short-range sensors. Nothing that would cause serious problems." Jake made a decision. "Do it," he said. Lisa nodded her agreement. Nova began reprogramming the magnetic field generators. It took 15 minutes. Then the AI announced that everything was ready. "Activating modified field pattern," Nova said. Jake felt a slight vibration through the ship's hull. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle shift in the air. He hurried back to the engine room and checked the quantum drive. The blue glow was slightly brighter now, and the holographic display showed something remarkable. The crystals were no longer moving randomly. They were moving in coordinated patterns, flowing like water toward their proper positions. "How long now?" Jake asked. Nova recalculated. "Approximately 8 hours." Jake grinned. 8 hours he could work with. He settled in to monitor the process. Lisa brought him food and water. She did not ask questions. She could see that something was happening, that progress was being made. Word spread through the colony that the drive was being repaired. People began gathering outside the ship. Governor Palmer arrived with several colony officials. They wanted to see the impossible repair for themselves. Jake tried to ignore the attention. He focused on the holographic display and watched the crystals slowly align. It was hypnotic. Millions of tiny structures all moving in harmony, all finding their places in the grand pattern. As the hours passed, the blue glow grew stronger. The quantum drive was coming back to life. Jake made small adjustments to the magnetic field pattern when needed. He increased power gradually as the alignment improved. By evening, the crystal was glowing with steady blue light. The pattern was nearly complete. Nova announced that alignment had reached 98%. Jake finally made it home near midnight. His father was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. Daniel looked up when Jake entered. "The entire colony is talking about what you did today," he said quietly. Jake collapsed into a chair. "I am not sure I believe it myself," he replied. The old man smiled. "I always knew you were capable of extraordinary things. You just needed the right opportunity." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Daniel spoke again. "Lisa Grant came by earlier. She wanted to make sure I knew about the payment arrangement. 10 million credits. That is more money than I can even imagine." Jake studied his father's face. "Are you upset?" he asked. Daniel shook his head. "No," he said. "I am grateful. And I am proud. But mostly I am wondering what you are going to do with your share." Jake had not thought that far ahead. "I do not know," he admitted. "Save it, I suppose. Maybe expand the workshop." Daniel nodded slowly. "Those are good practical plans," he said. "But I hope you will also consider doing something more." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. The old man set down his teacup. "You have a gift, Jake, a rare gift. You can see solutions that others cannot see. You can fix things that should not be fixable. That gift should not be limited to our small workshop on a frontier colony. The galaxy is much bigger than New Terra. There are problems out there that need someone like you." Jake frowned. "Are you saying I should leave?" he asked. Daniel smiled. "I am saying you should not limit yourself because of me. I will be fine here, especially with 10 million credits in the bank. But you should see where your gift can take you." Jake wanted to argue, but he was too tired. They could discuss the future later. Right now he just needed sleep. He went to his room and fell into bed without even removing his boots. His dreams were filled with glowing crystals and impossible patterns. When he woke the next morning, the sun was already high in the sky. He had slept for nearly 9 hours. He got up quickly and headed back to the crash site. Lisa was planning to attempt a flight test this morning. Jake wanted to be there in case anything went wrong. When he arrived, he found that security had expanded the perimeter significantly. The landing area had been cleared of spectators. Only essential personnel were allowed nearby. Lisa was in the cockpit running pre-flight checks. She saw Jake approaching and waved him aboard. "I want you here for the test flight," she said. "If anything goes wrong with the drive, you are the only one who might be able to fix it." Jake climbed into the cockpit and strapped himself into the co-pilot seat. The interior control still amazed him. Holographic displays floated in the air. Touch-sensitive panels responded to the slightest gesture. Everything was smooth and elegant. Nova's voice filled the cockpit. "All systems nominal," the AI reported. "Quantum drive is operating at optimal parameters. Power core is stable.
Navigation systems are calibrated.
Atmospheric engines are ready. We are cleared for departure." Lisa took a deep breath. "Here we go," she said. She touched several controls and the ship began to hum with power. Jake felt the vibration through his seat. Outside, the crowd had gathered at the perimeter to watch. Colony officials had set up recording equipment to document the moment. History was being made. The ship lifted smoothly off the ground. Lisa guided it upward slowly at first, testing the atmospheric engines. They responded perfectly. She took the ship higher, climbing through the morning sky. Jake watched the ground fall away below them. He had never been off the surface of New Terra, never seen his world from above. It was beautiful, green and blue with white clouds scattered across the landscape. Lisa smiled at his expression. "First time flying?" she asked. Jake nodded, unable to speak. She laughed and pushed the controls forward. The ship accelerated rapidly, pressing Jake back into his seat. They climbed higher and higher until the sky turned from blue to black and stars became visible even in daylight. "We are now in low orbit," Nova announced. "All systems continue to perform within optimal ranges." Lisa looked at Jake. "Ready for the real test?" she asked. She did not wait for an answer. She activated the quantum drive. Jake felt nothing at first. Then suddenly the stars outside began to stretch and blur. Reality itself seemed to bend around them. Colors that had no names flashed past the viewports. Time felt strange, like it was moving both too fast and too slow at the same moment. Then everything snapped back to normal. They were somewhere else. The stars outside were different. New Terra was gone. "We just jumped 15 light years," Lisa said with awe in her voice. The drive performed flawlessly. "Better than flawlessly. Nova, give me detailed performance data." The AI began reading out numbers and statistics. Jake did not understand most of them, but he understood Lisa's reaction. She was stunned. "According to these readings, the drive is operating at 103% efficiency," Lisa said. "That should not be possible. Quantum drives always lose some energy to field variance, but this one is somehow recovering energy during the jump." "Jake, what did you do?" He shook his head. "I just realigned the crystal matrix," he said. "I did not design anything new. I just fixed what was broken." Lisa stared at the data. "This changes everything," she said quietly. "If we can replicate this level of efficiency in other drives, we could cut travel times significantly, reduce fuel costs, extend the range of exploration vessels." She looked at Jake with an expression he could not quite read. "You do not even realize what you have accomplished, do you?" Jake felt uncomfortable. "I just fixed your ship," he said. Lisa laughed. "You did much more than that. But we can discuss the implications later. Right now I need to get to Capital Prime." She plotted a course and engaged the drive again. The universe bent and they jumped. They made the journey to Capital Prime in a series of jumps covering vast distances in minutes that would have taken weeks by conventional travel. Each jump was smooth and perfect. The quantum drive performed beautifully. Between jumps, Lisa told Jake more about her family and the company they controlled. Grant Industrial Combine had been started by her grandfather 70 years ago. Her father, Martin Grant, had expanded it into one of the largest manufacturing corporations in human space. They built everything from ship components to power cores to communication systems. Billions of people across hundreds of worlds used Grant technology every day. But success had brought conflict. Lisa had 3 siblings and they all wanted control of the company. Her oldest brother, Charles Grant, was ruthless and ambitious. He had been working to consolidate power for years. When their father became ill, Charles had accelerated his plans. He controlled the board of directors. He had allies in the government. The only thing stopping him from taking complete control was the will. Martin Grant had been very specific in his final instructions. All 4 children must be present for the reading, or they would be excluded from inheritance. Charles had tried to prevent Lisa from returning in time. He had used his influence to delay her departure from Capital Prime weeks ago. He had probably even arranged for her ship to malfunction, though Lisa had no proof. "Why tell me all this?" Jake asked. Lisa looked at him seriously. "Because you are going to meet my family soon," she said. "I want you to understand what you are walking into. They are powerful people, wealthy people. They are not like the colonists, you know. They will see you as beneath them. As someone to be dismissed or used. I want you to be prepared for that." Jake appreciated the warning, but he was more worried about whether he would get his payment. Lisa seemed to read his thoughts. "You will get your money," she said firmly. "I have already transferred the funds to a secure account. The moment we land, the payments will be released to you and your father. Charles cannot stop that. No one can." They arrived at Capital Prime just after midday local time. The planet was the jewel of the inner systems, a world that had been terraformed and sculpted over centuries into something almost artificial in its perfection. Cities covered entire continents. Orbital stations ringed the planet like a crown. Millions of ships moved through carefully controlled traffic lanes. Everything was organized and efficient and wealthy beyond measure. Lisa guided her ship down through the traffic patterns toward a private landing pad. Nova handled most of the navigation, responding to instructions from Capital Prime's traffic control systems. They descended through layers of atmosphere and cloud until the city came into view below them. Jake had thought the colony capital on New Terra was impressive. It was nothing compared to this. Buildings reached kilometers into the sky. Vehicles filled the air at multiple altitudes. Holographic advertisements the size of mountains floated between the towers. Everything glowed and sparkled and hummed with energy. Lisa landed her ship on a pad atop a tower that rose far above most of the surrounding city. As the engines powered down, she unstrapped from her seat and stood. "Thank you, Jake," she said. "Without you, I would have lost everything. Now come on. We need to get to the estate before the will reading begins." A luxury transport was waiting for them on the landing pad. It was sleek and automated, requiring no pilot. Lisa and Jake climbed aboard and it immediately lifted off, carrying them across the city. Jake stared out the windows in amazement. Everything was so clean, so advanced, so far beyond what he knew. The reading room was large and formal, with high ceilings and walls lined with screens displaying financial data and star charts. A long table dominated the center of the space. 3 people sat at the table, all dressed in expensive clothes that probably cost more than Jake's entire workshop. They looked up when Lisa entered. The expressions on their faces ranged from surprise to anger. A man at the head of the table stood abruptly. He was tall and broad-shouldered with gray streaks in his dark hair. His face was hard and his eyes were cold. "Lisa," he said flatly, "you made it. How unfortunate." Lisa walked to the table calmly. "Hello, Charles." She gestured to the other 2 people. "Hello, Margaret." "Hello, Peter." The woman, Margaret, was younger than Charles but shared his harsh features. She nodded slightly but said nothing. The other man, Peter, was the youngest of the siblings. He looked uncomfortable and avoided eye contact. Charles shifted his gaze to Jake. "And who is this?" he asked with obvious disdain. "You brought a mechanic to the reading of our father's will." Lisa sat down at the table. "This is Jake Morrison," she said. "He saved my life and made it possible for me to be here. Show him some respect." Charles laughed without humor. "Respect for a grease-covered laborer from some backwater colony? I think not." He sat back down and tapped a control on the table. A holographic image appeared above the surface. It showed a distinguished older man with white hair and tired eyes. The recording began to speak. "This is the last will and testament of Martin Grant," the image said. "If you are watching this, I have passed from this world. I hope my death was peaceful and that I am remembered kindly. Now we must address the matter of my legacy and my company." The recording continued for several minutes, going through formal legal language about assets and holdings. Jake barely listened. He was too aware of the hostile stares from Charles and Margaret. Peter kept glancing at him with what might have been curiosity. Finally, the recording reached the important part. "I have built Grant Industrial Combine from nothing," Martin Grant's image said. "I have worked for 70 years to create something meaningful, something that serves humanity. I will not see that work destroyed by greed or ambition. Therefore, I have divided my estate equally among my 4 children on one condition. All 4 must be present for this reading. Any child who is absent forfeits their share. That share will be distributed to the others." Charles had been smiling throughout the recording. The smile vanished as Martin continued speaking. However, the hologram said, "I have one additional condition. Control of the company cannot be inherited. It must be earned. I have established a board of directors independent of family influence. They will evaluate each of you over the next year. Whoever demonstrates the best leadership, the clearest vision, and the strongest commitment to the company's original mission will be named as my successor. Until that time, the company will be managed by the board. No single family member will have controlling authority." The silence that followed was absolute. Charles looked like he had been struck. "This is outrageous," he said finally. "Father promised me control of the company. I have worked for 20 years preparing for this." Margaret nodded in agreement. "This board is a betrayal," she said. "We should challenge the will in court." Peter spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet. Father was very clear about what he wanted. "I think we should respect that." Charles turned on his younger brother with fury in his eyes. "You would say that," he snapped. "You have no ambition. You have never wanted responsibility. This board arrangement benefits only Lisa. She was always Father's favorite." Lisa remained calm. "I was not Father's favorite," she said. "I was simply the one who listened to him, the one who understood what he was trying to build." The recording continued. There was more detail about the inheritance. The financial holdings were staggering. Each child would receive assets worth billions of credits, properties on dozens of worlds, stock in hundreds of companies. Martin Grant had been extraordinarily wealthy. But the real prize was control of Grant Industrial Combine. That was worth far more than mere money. That was power and influence spanning the entire inner systems. When the recording ended, Charles stood again. His face was red with barely controlled anger. "This is your doing," he said to Lisa. "You manipulated Father in his final days, made him change the will." Lisa shook her head. "I was not even on Capital Prime when Father recorded this," she said. "Check the date stamp. This will was made 3 months ago. I was in the outer colonies at that time. You know that because you made sure my transport was delayed." Charles had no response to that. He stormed out of the room with Margaret following close behind. Peter remained seated. He looked at Lisa with something like respect. "Welcome home," he said quietly. Then he left as well. Lisa sat back in her chair and closed her eyes. "That went better than expected," she said. "No one tried to kill me." Jake was not sure if she was joking. The lawyer who had been administering the will cleared his throat. "Miss Grant," he said, "there are documents to sign, financial transfers to authorize. It will take several hours to process everything." Lisa opened her eyes. "Fine," she said. "But first I need to complete a payment I promised." She touched a control on her wrist device and a screen appeared in the air. After several commands, she looked at Jake. "It is done," she said. 10 million credits have been transferred to your account. Another 10 million have been transferred to your father's account. You earned every bit of it." Jake felt dizzy. The numbers on the screen were incomprehensible. He had never seen so many zeros. "Thank you," he managed to say. Lisa smiled. "I should be thanking you. Without your help, I would have forfeited billions. 10 million is a bargain." The lawyer coughed politely again. "Miss Grant, there are people waiting to see you. The board of directors wants to meet. There are reporters outside. The story of your dramatic return has already spread through the media networks." Lisa sighed. "I suppose I cannot avoid them forever." She looked at Jake. "You should probably leave before the reporters find you. They will want to know everything about the genius mechanic who repaired an impossible ship." Jake agreed. He had no interest in dealing with reporters or cameras. Lisa arranged for a transport to take him to a hotel, one of the finest hotels on Capital Prime. She gave him access codes and credit accounts. "Get cleaned up," she said. "Buy some new clothes, rest, we will talk more tomorrow." Jake wanted to argue that he did not need luxury accommodations, but he was too tired to object. He let the transport carry him across the city to a tower that rose even higher than the Grant estate. The hotel occupied the top 50 floors. His room was bigger than his entire house on New Terra. Windows covered one wall, offering a view of the city that stretched to the horizon. He stood at the window for a long time, trying to process everything that had happened. Eventually, he showered and ordered food through the room's automated service system. The meal that arrived was unlike anything he had eaten before. Delicate flavors and artistic presentation. It tasted good, but Jake found himself missing his father's simple cooking. He tried to call home, but the time difference meant it was the middle of the night on New Terra. He left a message telling his father that everything was fine and the payment had been completed. Then he collapsed into the massive bed and slept for 12 hours straight. When he woke, the sun was setting over Capital Prime. The city lights were beginning to glow. Jake felt disoriented and out of place. He checked his communication device and found dozens of messages waiting. Most were from news organizations requesting interviews. Several were from companies offering jobs. One was from Lisa telling him to check the morning news feeds. Jake accessed the Planetary News Network and immediately saw why. His face was on the main screen. The headline read, "Frontier Mechanic Achieves Impossible Repair. Grant Prototype Ship Exceeds Design Specifications." The story detailed everything that had happened. Jake's repair of the quantum drive. The improved performance. Lisa's dramatic return to Capital Prime. The will reading. Some of the details were wrong or exaggerated, but the basic facts were accurate. The news presenter called Jake a genius and a pioneer. They speculated about what this meant for space travel and engineering. Jake turned off the feed. He did not feel like a genius. He felt like someone who had gotten lucky, someone who had been in the right place at the right time with the right problem. Another message arrived. This one was from an official government address. It was an invitation to meet with Admiral Henry Clark of the Earth Defense Fleet and Dr. Patricia Lang of the Human Systems Engineering Bureau. The meeting was scheduled for that evening at a government building downtown. The message was polite, but it was clear this was not optional. Important people wanted to talk to him. Jake got dressed in the new clothes he had purchased from the hotel's automated shop. Simple but well made. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. 3 days ago, he had been a small-town mechanic covered in grease. Now he was wearing expensive clothes and about to meet with admirals and bureau directors. Life had changed very fast. The transport that picked him up was government-owned, sleek and official with security features that made civilian vehicles look like toys. Admiral Clark pulled up a holographic display showing star charts and technical diagrams. He gestured to the scattered points of light representing human colonies. "There are over 400 settled worlds in human space," he said. "Most of them are frontier colonies like New Terra, small populations, limited resources, basic infrastructure. They rely on technology manufactured here in the inner systems. But there is a problem. The technology we send them is designed by engineers who have never set foot on a frontier world, who do not understand the conditions there, who assume access to resources and support systems that simply do not exist on the frontier." Dr. Lang took over the explanation. "Our ships break down on the frontier and cannot be repaired locally," she said. "Our equipment fails in environments we did not anticipate. Our systems are too complex for the people who need to use them. We lose millions of credits every year to these failures, but more importantly, we limit human expansion. Colonies cannot grow if they cannot maintain their own infrastructure. They remain dependent on the inner systems indefinitely. That is not sustainable as we expand further into space." Jake was beginning to understand. "You want to make technology that frontier colonies can actually work with," he said. The Admiral nodded. "Exactly, but we need people who understand both sides. People who know advanced engineering principles but also understand practical limitations. People like you. You took technology designed by the best engineers in the inner systems, and you made it work better using basic tools and intuition. That is the skill set we need. That is what we want to teach others." "What exactly are you proposing?" Jake asked. Dr. Lang touched a control and a new image appeared. It showed a building complex surrounded by training facilities. "We want to create a new institute," she said. "The Human Systems Applied Engineering Academy. It would train engineers specifically for frontier conditions. Students would learn theory but also practical problem solving. They would learn to work with limited resources, to improvise, to see solutions that others miss. We want you to be the founding director. Jake felt his stomach drop. Me, he said. I have no formal education, no credentials, no experience running anything larger than a small workshop. Admiral Clark smiled. Those are exactly the reasons we want you. Traditional educators would create a traditional program. We do not want that. We want something revolutionary, something that breaks the mold. Your lack of formal credentials is an advantage. You can teach people to think differently because you think differently. You see what trained engineers cannot see because you were never trained to see things their way. Jake shook his head. This is too much, he said. I am just a mechanic from New Terra. I fix hover trucks and farming equipment. I got lucky once with an advanced ship. That does not make me qualified to run an academy. Dr. Lang leaned forward. Luck had nothing to do with what you accomplished, she said firmly. We have reviewed your repair logs from New Terra. Over the past 6 years, you have completed over 2,000 repairs. Your success rate is 97%. Most certified mechanics achieve 70 to 80%. You consistently solve problems faster and more efficiently than people with decades more experience. That is not luck. That is extraordinary natural talent combined with dedication and hard work. The galaxy needs more people like you, and you are uniquely positioned to find and train them. Jake felt overwhelmed. This was moving too fast. 3 days ago, his biggest concern was whether he could afford parts for a broken water pump. Now he was being offered the chance to run an academy, to change how humanity approached engineering. It was insane. I need time to think, he said. The Admiral nodded. Of course, he said. This is a major decision. Take all the time you need. But I should mention that the position comes with significant benefits. A salary of 500,000 credits annually. Full medical care for you and your family. Housing on any world you choose. Access to resources and equipment most people never see. And the satisfaction of knowing you are advancing human civilization. There is more, Dr. Lang added. The ship you repaired was not just any prototype. It was a scout vessel designed for deep space exploration. We had written it off as a total loss after the drive failure. We had already ordered a replacement at a cost of 40 million credits. Your repair saved us that expense. More importantly, you proved the design is viable. We can now move forward with production. Dozens of those ships will be built over the next 2 years. Each one will extend humanity's reach further into the galaxy. You made that possible. Jake tried to process the information. Everything was happening so fast. He thought about his father back on New Terra. Daniel had said Jake should not limit himself, that his gift should not be confined to a small workshop. Maybe this was what his father had meant. Maybe this was the opportunity that came once in a lifetime. But it meant leaving home, leaving everything familiar, stepping into a world he did not understand, a world of politics and bureaucracy and expectations. I do not know if I can do this, Jake said honestly. I do not know if I am the right person. Admiral Clark stood and walked to the window. He looked out at the city lights spreading to the horizon. 20 years ago, he said, I was a junior officer on a patrol ship at the edge of known space. We encountered a derelict vessel, ancient, possibly alien. Our scientists wanted to study it, but they could not figure out how to access the interior. The hull was made of materials we could not cut or scan. They were ready to give up, but one of our engineers, a woman named Ruth Hayes, suggested we stop trying to force our way in. She said we should try to understand what the ship was designed to do, how it wanted to work. She studied it for 3 days, and then simply touched a specific point on the hull in a specific pattern. The ship opened for her. She had figured out the interface through intuition and patience. The Admiral turned back to Jake. Ruth Hayes had no formal training in xenoarchaeology. She was a maintenance engineer, but she succeeded where specialists failed because she approached the problem differently. Your situation reminds me of that. You are not limited by traditional thinking. You do not know what is supposed to be impossible, so you attempt things others would not even try. That is valuable beyond measure. I watched Ruth Hayes go on to revolutionize how we study ancient technology. I believe you could do the same for modern engineering, but only if you are willing to take the chance. Dr. Lang added one more piece of information. If you accept this position, you would have full autonomy over curriculum and hiring. You would choose where to locate the academy. You would decide who to admit as students. You would shape the program to match your vision. The government would provide funding and resources but would not interfere with your methods. We want you to create something unique, something that cannot exist within the normal bureaucratic structures. Jake felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. This was real. They were serious. They were offering him the chance to do something that mattered, something that could help people across hundreds of worlds. "Can I tour the existing engineering facilities?" Jake asked. "See what is already being done? I want to understand what I would be working with." Dr. Lang smiled. "Of course. We have arranged access for you starting tomorrow. You can visit the Central Engineering Institute. Talk to current instructors. Review their programs. That will help you make an informed decision." The Admiral checked the time. "It is late," he said. "You should rest. We will reconvene in 2 days. That gives you time to think and explore. Whatever you decide, we respect your choice. But we hope you will seriously consider this opportunity." Jake stood and shook hands with both of them again. As he was leaving, Dr. Lang called out, "Mr. Morrison," she said, "one more thing. If you do accept, we would like you to publish a detailed account of how you repaired the quantum drive. Make it available to engineers across human space. Your methods could inspire new approaches to dozens of problems we currently consider unsolvable." Jake nodded and left the conference room. His mind was spinning with thoughts and possibilities and fears. The transport took him back to the hotel. When he arrived, he found Lisa waiting in the lobby. She stood when she saw him. "I heard you met with Clark and Lang," she said. "What did they offer you?" Jake told her everything as they rode the elevator to his floor. Lisa listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke. "This is bigger than either of us realized. What you did to my ship has started something. A shift in how people think about technology and engineering. You could ride that wave and become incredibly influential. Or you could walk away and go back to your quiet life on New Terra. There is no wrong choice." Jake invited her into his room and they sat by the window looking out at the city. "What would you do?" he asked. Lisa thought about it. "A week ago," she said, "I would have told you to take the position without hesitation. Money, power, influence, those were the things I valued. But meeting you has changed my perspective. You care about doing good work, about helping people, about making things better. Those values are rare in the inner systems. If you take this position, you will face pressure to compromise those values, to play politics, to make decisions based on what benefits your career rather than what benefits humanity." The response from Admiral Clark came within minutes of Jake sending his acceptance. A single line, "Welcome aboard. We begin planning tomorrow." Jake sat back and let the reality of his decision sink in. He had just committed to something that terrified and excited him in equal measure. He was going to build an academy. He was going to train engineers. He was going to try to change how humanity approached technology. It seemed impossible. But then again, repairing a quantum drive had seemed impossible too. He called his father. It was morning on New Terra and Daniel answered immediately. "Jake," the older man said with obvious relief, "I have been worried. The news here has been full of stories about you. Are you all right?" Jake assured him he was fine, and then told him about the offer from the government and his decision to accept. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Daniel spoke. "I am proud of you, son. Prouder than I can express. You are going to do remarkable things. Just promise me you will not lose yourself in all of this. Remember who you are and where you come from." Jake promised. He ended the call feeling both comforted and homesick. The next 2 weeks were a blur of meetings and planning sessions. Admiral Clark and Dr. Lang introduced Jake to dozens of officials and experts. Everyone had opinions about how the academy should work, what it should teach, where it should be located, how students should be selected. Jake listened politely, but he was already forming his own vision. He knew what he wanted to create. A place that felt more like a workshop than a traditional school. A place where students learned by doing rather than just studying. A place that valued practical wisdom as much as theoretical knowledge. The biggest decision was where to establish the academy. Many officials assumed it would be built on Capital Prime or another inner system world. But Jake had other ideas. He wanted it on a frontier colony. Somewhere students would experience the conditions they were being trained for. Somewhere they would understand the challenges faced by the people they were meant to serve. He proposed New Terra. The officials were skeptical. New Terra had limited infrastructure. No existing educational facilities. No nearby manufacturing centers. It would be expensive and difficult to build there. But Jake was insistent. This academy needed to be on the frontier. It needed to be part of the frontier. Otherwise, it would just be another inner system institution pretending to understand frontier needs. Lisa supported his position. She had become an unexpected ally in the planning process. She attended many of the meetings and advocated for Jake's vision. She argued that locating the academy on New Terra sent an important message. It showed that the inner systems were willing to invest in the frontier, to build institutions there rather than just extracting resources. Her support carried weight. The Grant family name opened doors. Eventually, the officials agreed. The academy would be built on New Terra. Construction would begin immediately. The goal was to open within 6 months. Jake worked with architects and engineers to design the facility. He insisted on certain features: large workshop spaces with tools and equipment, testing grounds where students could work on real machinery, living quarters that were comfortable but not luxurious. He wanted students focused on learning, not distracted by comfort. He also insisted the academy be open to anyone with aptitude, regardless of background or ability to pay. The government would provide full scholarships to all students. The only entrance requirement was passing a practical skills assessment. Show you could think creatively and solve problems, and you were in. Recruiting instructors was challenging. Most certified engineers did not want to move to a frontier colony to teach. But Jake was not looking for traditional instructors anyway. He wanted people who had worked in the field, who had dealt with broken equipment and limited resources, who knew what it meant to improvise. He found them in unexpected places. A former military mechanic who had kept ships running through 3 combat deployments. A mining engineer who had designed equipment modifications that doubled productivity. A communications specialist who had jury-rigged colony networks with salvaged parts. These were the people who understood frontier reality. While construction proceeded on New Terra, Jake spent time developing curriculum. He rejected the standard academic model. No lengthy lectures, no memorization of formulas. Instead, students would be given broken equipment and told to fix it. They would be given design challenges with specific constraints. They would work in teams on real problems facing actual colonies. Theory would be taught as needed to support practical work, not as an end in itself. Some education experts were horrified by this approach. They said it lacked rigor, that students needed foundational knowledge before applying it. Jake disagreed. He had learned by doing, and it had worked. He believed others could learn the same way. Lisa made good on her proposal to partner Grant Industrial Combine with the academy. She established a new division focused on frontier-appropriate technology and pledged to fund research projects involving academy students. She also donated equipment and materials for the workshops. Her brother Charles was furious about the expense. He argued it was wasting company resources on pointless charity. But the board of directors saw the potential. They recognized that frontier colonies represented a massive untapped market. Technology designed for their specific needs could be enormously profitable. Lisa was demonstrating exactly the kind of vision their father had wanted. Charles was simply protecting existing profit margins. The board began to favor Lisa in the competition for leadership. Jake returned to New Terra 4 months after leaving. The change was dramatic. Construction crews had transformed a section of land near his old workshop into a sprawling campus. Buildings were rising from the ground. Roads were being paved. Infrastructure was being installed. The colony had never seen this level of investment. Governor Palmer greeted Jake personally at the landing pad. He was effusive with praise and promises of support. Jake appreciated the sentiment, but he knew the real work was just beginning. Buildings were easy. Creating an actual educational revolution would be much harder. His father was waiting at home. Daniel looked better than Jake had seen him in years. The 10 million credits had allowed him to receive proper medical treatment. His arthritis was being managed with advanced therapies. The constant pain that had shadowed his life was finally under control. But more than the physical improvement, Daniel seemed lighter, happier. Relieved of the burden of financial worry, he had rediscovered joy in simple things. He had expanded his garden, started teaching local children about plants, found peace. Seeing his father like this made everything worthwhile for Jake. This was why he had taken the risk. This was what success really looked like. The academy opened 6 months after Jake had accepted the position. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of applications arrived from across the frontier. Young people who had talent but no opportunity, who had been fixing broken equipment on farms and mining stations and transport ships, who had been told they were not smart enough for real education because they lacked formal credentials. Jake and his instructors reviewed every application personally. They were not looking for academic achievement. They were looking for evidence of creative problem solving, of persistence, of the ability to see solutions others missed. They accepted 200 students for the first class. The students arrived from dozens of different worlds, men and women ranging from 18 to 40 years old. Some had basic education, others had almost none. But they all shared something: a hunger to learn, a natural aptitude for understanding how things worked, a determination to make something of themselves. Jake spoke to them on the first day. He stood in front of the assembled group and felt more nervous than he had facing the quantum drive. These people were trusting him, believing he could teach them, believing this experiment would work. He kept his speech simple. "You are here because you can do something most people cannot," he said. "You can look at a broken system and see how to fix it. You can improvise with limited resources. You can think creatively under pressure. Those skills are valuable, more valuable than you probably realize. This academy exists to develop those skills, to give you knowledge that will make you even more capable. But we are not going to teach you the traditional way. We are not going to fill your heads with theory and hope you can apply it someday. We are going to throw you into real problems and teach you what you need to know as you work. It will be hard. It will be frustrating. Some of you will fail. But those who succeed will leave here as engineers who can work anywhere, who can solve problems others cannot, who can help build the future of humanity on the frontier." The students responded with determination. The first weeks were chaotic. Students struggled with equipment they had never seen, with concepts they did not understand, with the pressure of constant practical challenges. But they learned, faster than Jake had dared hope. They helped each other, shared insights, developed techniques. The workshop spaces buzzed with activity day and night. Students took apart engines and rebuilt them. They designed solutions to real problems submitted by frontier colonies. They worked on projects for Grant Industrial. The second year of the academy brought new challenges and unexpected opportunities. Applications doubled. Jake and his team had to expand the facility and hire more instructors. The original campus could only accommodate 200 students at a time. Now they needed space for 400. Construction began again. New workshop buildings, additional housing, expanded testing facilities. New Terra was transforming from a quiet frontier colony into a center of innovation and education. The economic impact was significant. Jobs were created. Businesses opened to serve the academy population. Property values increased. Some longtime residents complained about the changes, but most recognized that the academy had brought prosperity and opportunity to their world. Jake remained focused on maintaining the academy's core principles. As it grew, there was pressure to adopt more traditional structures, to create formal departments and hierarchies, to standardize curriculum, to make everything more efficient and predictable. Jake resisted these pressures. He understood that what made the academy effective was its flexibility, its willingness to experiment, its focus on individual student development rather than mass production of identical graduates. Every student learned differently. Every student had unique strengths and weaknesses. The academy needed to accommodate that diversity, not eliminate it. Some administrators found this approach frustrating, but the results spoke for themselves. Academy graduates were performing exceptionally well in the field. Companies specifically requested them. Colonies wanted them. The military recruited them. Success justified the unconventional methods. New partnerships developed as the academy's reputation grew. Research institutions wanted to collaborate. Universities wanted to understand the teaching methods. Governments wanted to fund expansion to other colonies. Jake was careful about which partnerships to accept. He turned down offers that would compromise the academy's independence or mission. Money was not the goal. Impact was the goal. Every decision was evaluated based on whether it would help train better engineers and create better technology for frontier communities. This principled approach earned respect even from those whose offers were rejected. Jake Morrison became known as someone who could not be bought, who valued integrity over profit. That reputation became part of the academy's identity. The relationship with Grant Industrial Combine continued to flourish. Lisa's Frontier Technology division was now one of the company's fastest-growing segments. Products designed in collaboration with academy students were selling across hundreds of worlds. The profit margins were good, But more importantly, the products were making real differences in people's lives. A medical scanner that could be maintained by colony doctors with basic training. A food processing system that worked reliably in harsh conditions. A communications device that required minimal power and could be repaired with common tools. These inventions were not glamorous. They would never make headlines. But they improved daily life for millions of people. That was what mattered. Jake received numerous awards and honors during the second year. Academic institutions offered him honorary degrees. Professional organizations made him a member. Governments gave him medals and titles. He accepted them politely but never displayed them prominently. The recognition was nice, but it was not why he did this work. He did it because broken things needed fixing. Because talented people needed opportunities. Because humanity's expansion into space required practical solutions to practical problems. The awards were acknowledgement of success, but they were not the success itself. The real success was measured in graduates finding meaningful work. In colonies receiving equipment they could actually use. In the slow, steady improvement of frontier life, his father's health continued to improve. Daniel had become something of a celebrity himself, as the father of the famous Jake Morrison. He handled the attention with grace and humor. He still tended gardens because he loved the work, not because he needed the income. He had hired several assistants and was teaching them his methods. He had also become an informal advisor to the academy, helping design the campus landscaping and teaching occasional classes about biology and natural systems. Jake loved watching his father thrive. Every time he saw Daniel smile without pain, every time he heard him laugh freely, Jake felt grateful for the choices he had made. The money had bought medical care, but more than that, it had bought dignity and peace for a man who had worked hard all his life and deserved both. Lisa visited New Terra regularly. Her position as CEO was now permanent. The board had recognized her leadership and vision. Charles had tried to challenge her several times, but each attempt had failed. The company was thriving under her direction. Stock prices were up. New markets were opening. Innovation was happening. Peter had become her chief operating officer and was proving to be highly capable. Margaret had eventually reconciled with Lisa and now managed the company's inner system operations. The Grant family had found a functional dynamic after years of conflict. Lisa credited much of this to lessons learned from Jake and the academy. Business was not just about profit. It was about purpose. Companies that served real needs with quality products would always succeed in the long run. One evening during a visit, Lisa and Jake sat on the academy campus watching students work in the workshops. It was late, but the spaces were still active. Students did not follow rigid schedules. They worked when inspiration struck or when deadlines demanded. The flexible approach produced better results than forcing everyone to work 9 to 5. Lisa watched the activity with satisfaction. "This is what my father would have wanted," she said. "Investment that creates opportunity. Technology that serves humanity. Business aligned with values." Jake nodded. "Your father would be proud of what you have built." Lisa smiled. "We built it together. You showed me what was possible. I just provided resources and support. They talked about the future." Lisa had proposals for expanding the partnership. More collaborative research projects, scholarships for promising students, funding for experimental programs. Jake listened and considered each idea carefully. Some he accepted, others he modified. A few he declined. The partnership worked because both parties respected boundaries and stayed true to their core missions. As they talked, an alarm sounded from one of the workshops. Not an emergency alarm, a notification tone. Something required attention. Jake and Lisa walked over to investigate. Inside the workshop, a group of students was clustered around a piece of equipment. It was a prototype engine they had been designing for small transport vehicles. Something was wrong. Smoke was rising from one of the components. The students were arguing about what had failed and how to fix it. Jake approached and asked what happened. One student, a young woman named Claire Henderson from a mining colony, explained. "We were testing the ignition sequence and something overloaded. We think it was the power regulator, but we are not sure." Jake studied the damaged component. Then he asked a question. "What does the engine want to do?" The students looked confused. He asked again, "What is the engine's purpose? What is it trying to accomplish?" Claire thought about it. "It wants to convert fuel into motion efficiently and reliably," she said. Jake nodded. Good. Now what stopped it from doing that? Claire examined the damage more carefully. The power regulator limited fuel flow too much, she said slowly. The engine could not do what it wanted to do, so it forced the issue and damaged the regulator. Jake smiled. Exactly. So how do you fix it? Claire understood now. We need a regulator that provides enough fuel flow while still maintaining safety limits. We were too conservative with our specifications. The engine needs room to work. She and her team immediately began discussing modifications. Jake stepped back. Lisa had watched the entire interaction. You did not tell them the answer, she said. Jake shrugged. They already knew the answer. They just needed to ask the right question. That is what teaching really is. Helping people find their own insights. A message arrived on Jake's communication device. It was from Admiral Clark. The message was brief but significant. New prototype ship encountered problems during deep space mission. Standard repair protocols failed. Requesting your consultation. Ship is 3 days away at current speed. Jake showed the message to Lisa. Looks like someone else needs an impossible repair, she said. Are you going to help them? Jake thought about it. The academy was running well. His instructors were capable. The students were progressing. He could afford to take a few weeks away. And honestly, he missed working directly on challenging technical problems. Administration and teaching were rewarding, but sometimes he wanted to get his hands dirty with real engineering work. He sent a reply to Admiral Clark accepting the consultation. 3 days later, a military vessel arrived in orbit around New Terra. It was a deep space exploration ship, much larger than Lisa's prototype had been. The crew had encountered an unknown energy phenomenon that had damaged multiple systems. Their engineers had managed to keep life support and basic propulsion working, but the quantum drive was offline, and several other systems were failing. They needed help, and they needed it quickly. They were still weeks away from the nearest major facility. Jake went aboard with a team of advanced students.